Good morning and welcome. It's 10 o'clock Pacific time. We always like to start right on time. We've got a webinar for you today. It's called Beyond the Basics of Compensation, 5 Ways to Elevate Your Approach. And I've got Tyler Mavison here with me today. Last time I had Tyler on, we talked about the Beyond Compensation survey that we ran last year. And now we're here to talk about compensation. I know a lot of employers are gearing up for their compensation reviews, and this is hopefully perfect timing for you. So we'll get started. A couple quick housekeeping items. This web, we always try to make them short and sweet. We know you're busy, so 45-minute live session maximum. So that means if there's no Q&A, no questions from the audience, we'll just end when we need to. And feel free, the question and answer module is open, so feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. I'll keep an eye on that and ask Tyler throughout the presentation. And we're trying to keep this very interactive, so please ask questions. There'll also be a couple times where I'll prompt you to enter things into the chat window. So the difference is if you have a question, put that in the Q&A module. If you have just something you want to chat, or I prompt you to say something, put it in the chat and we'll look at that, and everybody can see that feed as well. And if you have to bail early or you want to share this with a team member, the slides and recording are always available on demand. So we'll follow up probably tomorrow with the slides and recording as well. All right. And I don't know if I mentioned this, we're going to do some polls too. So keep an eye on the poll and we'll talk through that. Okay. Tyler Mavison is our speaker for today. Tyler, how long have you been at Xenium? It's been over a decade.
Yeah, it's definitely been over a decade. Close to 12 years now.
12 years. And then you got certified as a compensation professional in
2019. Yeah.
2019.
Yeah.
Okay. And so maybe give people some perspective of the type of work that you're doing on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. So for clients and organizations, I usually am brought in to overhaul a currently existing compensation structure or pay grade structure, developing that from scratch as well. I run market analysis for positions, as well as develop incentive and bonus plans for employees and certain roles. And also I do pay equity analysis. So I conduct pay equity analysis for organizations to see how they're aligned up with the Oregon Equal Pay Act, and provide recommendations on how to make any adjustments or revisions to their current policy.
What would you say the split between you being deep in the data and consulting with clients is, if you had to do a percentage?
It's probably 50-50, honestly.
Really?
A lot of the data is very intense data oriented, but also making sure you're communicating that to the leadership teams or whoever your client contact is. It's definitely a big portion of the responsibilities.
Excellent. Well, it's good to have you. So you're going to cover in today's topic 5 different areas of compensation that we suggest that employers pay attention to. And our hope is that you leave here with some action items that you could take back to your organization so you can have a successful compensation strategy. And by the way, I am Brandon Laws, your moderator. I'm Vice President of Marketing and Products, host our podcast, and I moderate these webinars as well. Okay. We did have a question that came in. I just wanted to clarify it for everybody. So making sure that everybody's muted. Yes, in this webinar platform, everybody's muted except for Tyler and I. So do not worry about going off mute. All right, Tyler, let's get into it.
All right. Yeah. So the 5 ways to enhance your compensation approach. So really the kind of key to any start of an overhaul of a compensation program and plan is your job descriptions. So do you have the job descriptions for your positions in your organization? Are there ones that you need to develop or create? So make sure you're reviewing those. Review the current job descriptions in your organization. Is there outdated information? Is there more responsibilities or more roles that positions are taking on that you need to make sure are listed in the job description? So oftentimes, job descriptions are created, but they're never updated consistently. And so a lot of the information could be, it doesn't align with the current role. So, if there are new positions or a position is taking on, different facets of the role, have an interview with the employee or the manager to obtain all that information and to ensure that you're capturing the roles and responsibilities of that position adequately. Also, it's important to ensure that job descriptions are aligned with federal and state level laws. So whether that be the Americans with Disabilities Act, or physical environments and work environment requirements for the position. So we have a shift to remote work now. So if that's going to be a hybrid position, a remote position, what does the office environment look like for that position? So it's very key to have that listed and shown in the job description to make sure that when we get to the part of benchmarking positions, that we have all the apples to apples comparisons that we need. And lastly, it's important to review job descriptions consistently. So we recommend looking at them on an annual basis. It's important to kind of make sure that if there's any adjustments to those positions, that they are being captured and updated, appropriately and consistently. And especially if a position is new or is taking on different roles and wearing multiple hats in the position, making sure that we're having that captured as well.
Let's hear from the audience. And I just realized I did not have the chat activated, so it should work now for everybody. But I want to hear from you. Like, how often are you updating your job descriptions? And this could be maybe a gray answer where you update as needed or for new positions. But let's hear from you. Put it in the chat how often you're updating your job descriptions. And then Tyler, I want to ask you, how often should organizations be reviewing job descriptions, and what are some common indicators that a job description might need some updating?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. So, I think at least annually is the recommended, requirement, or not requirement, as needed is recommended means to update job descriptions. So, if you start seeing positions or roles that are taking on more responsibilities than normal or what was outlined in the original job description, it's definitely time to update those positions. A lot of times you keep just adding responsibilities to a role, and that may not adequately reflect, the compensation associated with that position. So maybe it needs to be broken out into two different positions. Maybe we need to add some premiums to that individual's compensation or salary if they are taking on a lot more responsibilities. But the market fluctuates so consistently. So you can see a lot of times, if positions moving from in office to hybrid or remote, we want to make sure that that's being captured as well. So generally, annually speaking is kind of the recommended approach, but also you can do it, semi-annually or, as needed in terms of if the position's changing rapidly.
We're getting a lot of good comments here, and it sounds like maybe they're taking some of our advice, because a lot of folks are updating job descriptions at annual review time.
Yeah.
And as needed. So
yeah. I mean, and also too, speaking with job descriptions, once you get involved in the process, and it is kind of a overtaking, an undertaking to go take all these positions on and review and make sure they're being, accurately captured. But then you start seeing if you need to hire a new position, or you need to reevaluate a role. So it gives you the ability to, and the insight into your positions in your organization and what these individuals and employees are truly doing within their role.
Well, and I think, like you probably mentioned this already, but the most important part of the job description in terms of compensation is because you're matching duties,
right,
not title, right?
Right. Oh, and then and I'm glad you brought that up. So oftentimes we see, when benchmarking a position, you always want to, organizations try to benchmark it to the title. Okay, well, this person is an accounting manager, so let's benchmark it to the market of an accounting manager. And you might get a completely different compensation. but the essential functions of the role might dictate that it's maybe not a manager level position. Maybe they are just managing processes and not necessarily people. So we want to make sure that those essential duties and essential functions are captured accurately. And as I mentioned, we like to compare apples to apples in compensation. So make sure that we have those essential functions and are benchmarking those. It's not the title, but it's the role, the responsibilities, and the function of the position itself.
Anything else you want to say about job descriptions before we go to our second point?
No, I think you make sure to consistently review. That's kind of the key point there.
Who should be the holder of the job descriptions too?
Yeah, well, HR, usually you have, HR is responsible for managing the kind of the job description process. The hiring manager or the manager of the employee should have good insight into what their direct reports are doing. So it can be housed with them, but generally speaking, HR is responsible for the job descriptions.
Excellent. All right, number 2.
All right, yeah. So this is a very, very important one. So create an ongoing feedback loop. So when you establish compensation and you have a strategy in place, or maybe you do or do not have a strategy in place, but when you have market information, and you're assigning compensation to employees and to positions and to roles, ensuring that you have that feedback from your employees over what's working and what's not working in your compensation plan, or your total rewards plan for that matter. So conducting frequent employee compensation and benefits surveys. So having those pulse checks are vital to the well-being of your compensation plan. Is the compensation, is the benefits that you're offering, is it well received with your employees, or are there some facets of that need to be adjusted and shifted? So your employees are going to be your toughest critics in terms of compensation, but they're going to be the most vital critics in terms of compensation, because they are the driving workforce of your organization. So and also not only just having those pulse checks, but reviewing those pulse checks with your employees. So that brings it to the next bullet. Review the results of the survey with staff and communicate any changes. So it's important to see the results and talk through it and walk through the results of these surveys with employees. So you have that transparency, that communication with them over what's working well and what's not, and what can we do and to change our approach to that. And then also the last point is implement a consistent performance management process that has regular feedback from employees. So a lot of times, compensation gets looked at, once a year, but also you need to incorporate performance. Is the employee performing well in that role? And how do we tie that to compensation? And how do we tie, reward higher performance, or, look to encourage better performance from, maybe underperforming employees? So kind of the statistic that we pulled, 65% of survey employees desire more feedback. They're 3 times more engaged when they receive daily feedback from their manager compared to annual feedback. So maybe shifting an approach from that annual feedback to more quarterly check-ins and performance evaluations or reviews. Maybe not formalized, but maybe just in a kind of an informal check-in with employees can go a long way in creating that feedback on what's working well in terms of our benefits, our compensation, our total rewards, as well as our performance of the individual there. And then the last statistic is that highly engaged employees are 87% less likely to leave their roles, which is key. So you have that retention aspect with that feedback and that clear communication on compensation, and so they're less likely to leave the organization as well.
Okay, we're going to pause here and get launch our first poll to get people a little engaged and just to see where everybody's at too. So we're going to ask the question: does your organization currently conduct employee surveys over compensation and benefits? The poll should be launched on your screen. Go ahead and answer that. Oh, people are answering fast. They're ready to go. And if you want to add context, feel free to add to the chat, like, what kind of surveys you're doing, what kind of questions are you asking? Like, let's knowledge share here, because I think we ask it in the What People Want from Work survey that we run. By the way, it's free every single year for clients and non-clients. compensation is always the lowest rated one. And finding out why is kind of an art and a skill in itself. Like we need to be asking our people like, what, okay, why are you rating it so low? And is there anything we could do about that? So I think it's just important to keep a pulse on it. And I love this as a point here. Okay. Wow. 100% people answered. I'm going to end the poll, share results. Do you see it on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So 35% said yes. 59% said no.
Yeah.
And there's an opportunity.
Yeah, there's definitely an opportunity. And that's about right. It's one of the kind of, it's overlooked a little bit. And, it depends on the compensation, philosophy of the organization, how transparent you want to be with compensation. And so we're seeing a lot of employees really value that transparency, and communication of compensation. So it's definitely an opportunity to say, hey, let's do a quick 5-question survey over our compensation and benefits, and let's see what employees say. And then at least you have that information and that data to kind of go off of and build upon.
Right. Okay. I'll stop sharing and then we'll move on. Number 3.
Oh yeah. So this is kind of, where I spend a lot of my time too, is market information. So obtaining market compensation data. So, and not only that, but obtaining, useful and to the first point, well-vetted compensation data. So we try, it's the goal of our organization to try to obtain information that is vetted against other metrics. A lot of survey sources vet their results against the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Are we aligned with what's being reported to the BLS? And what are some things that are not being affected or adjusted in those positions? So especially with employer reported data sources. So the first point mentions, a lot of times the free sources that you can see on the web and on the line, they are crowdsourced information. So people go onto the website, they enter information, they assign whatever duties they think they do, and then they have that information to utilize, and they spit that back out for someone who's looking for an accountant position, can see what other crowdsourced data is going. The good thing about that is that there's a lot, you can get a lot of information. It's, they're very robust in terms of the amount of people that are surveyed. The downside is that it's not as accurate. So you want to ensure that it's employer reported data. So the HR departments, the finance departments, what are they reporting the compensation for these positions, and as well as the functions of the role. So a lot of times employees can inflate their duties, or maybe not capture what they truly do in those crowdsourced surveys. So you don't get as much or as valuable information or useful information there. So ensuring that you utilize well-vetted employer reported data sources is really key. And then another thing is, when you're pulling information and you're looking at surveys, is that do you have the capability and the ability to adjust certain levers and metrics, to make sure that you're comparing to your competitive market? Can you adjust the industry? Can you adjust the location? Or, at the granular level for the employee, can you adjust the level of experience of the position, or add any premiums to those roles? So those are key to ensuring that you are capturing that role to its full extent. We try to, in compensation, we say we want to get at least a 70% job duties match. Are we capturing that 70% in the role when we're benchmarking data? So utilizing those industry specific surveys as well can be beneficial. So if there are surveys out there that pertain to your specific industry, making sure that you pull those and utilize those on a consistent basis are key to managing your compensation strategy and plan. So we definitely see a lot of organizations not utilize well-vetted sources. A lot of times it can be expensive. So that's one of the reasons cost can be one of the key things that they look for when kind of signing on for a employer reported data source.
I want to hone in on that because I think what often managers and leaders are grappling with is that employees are coming to them saying like, "Hey, I was on
Mhm.
Glassdoor and I searched my title," or I mean, I hear people are now using generative AI to like type in their job description or title, and then it's spitting back some like
Yeah,
big ranges of information when they're not actually putting in job duties, geographic location and whatnot. So it's kind of a slippery slope and kind of dangerous. And then employers are met with like, what do I
right,
say in
right.
response to that? And that's why these employer reported data sources are really important. What are a couple of examples of those sources, and are they accessible to any employer?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a plethora of employer-driven data sources. So pay factors, ERI, which is what Zenium utilizes.
Hmm.
Culpeper is a good kind of life sciences, healthcare, tech survey source that's employer-reported data. You know, Radford for the tech organizations, Mercer, Milliman. There's a lot of employer-driven data. Things like Salary.com, PayScale. Um, those are crowdsourced information. So you can take those with a grain of salt in terms of where they're getting the data from. And as you mentioned, like with AI as well, you know, they AI is job scraping, as we call it, where they're looking through job postings and they are looking at things that have been reported on like job posting websites like LinkedIn or Indeed, and then they're pulling this data from what that position was. It may not be, again, they're pulling it from a title as well. So it may not be accurately reflective of what that role truly is. And it's going to provide you with a really large range. So having, you know, well vetted employer data can help refine that down to really what's you know, what's the market data is for your industry and your competitive set.
We just got a question in that I think is worth sharing with the wider group. So the question was, is there a place that we can find benefits to benchmark against? And we've struggled with
Yeah.
finding external sources for this. So we just created our own survey called the
Yeah.
Beyond Compensation, which is what you presented on this fall.
Mhm.
We have an ebook or report. I believe it's on, if you go to our website on the free resources, go to downloads, and then there's the Beyond Compensation report. That'll give you a pretty good sample size of employers and what they're offering in this area. So
Mhm.
we had to create our own because we were getting this question from our clients so often. So it's there for free.
Yep.
Anything else you'd say on this before we move on?
Uh, no, I mean, and it's really, you can have multiple data sources too as well, because you know, I
Mhm.
as I say, the more data the better to compare, you know, have comparables to the position. So yeah, it's making sure you obtain those well vetted data sources are key.
Okay, number 4. This is a biggie.
Yeah, so pay equity analysis. So yeah, this is a especially big now that, you know, the Oregon Equal Pay Act and a lot of pay equity laws came into place in other states. You know, Massachusetts, California, Washington, to name a few. So it's really become vital to not just look at the external market data for position, but where does the compensation relate to an employee in that position and versus comparable positions that they might, have similar functions with. So, you know, with any pay equity analysis, you want to start from a census report of your organization, pull information as it relates to your staff that, you know, details compensation and benefits. So, you know, a lot of these equal pay acts or pay equity laws, you know, they include not just base compensation, but total compensation as well, with benefits and other perks, monetary perks. So, you know, pull a census report that you can get, you know, tenure, you can get location of where the individual works, you know, responsibilities, education, and prior experience, as well as you can, you know, if you're a large organization, you can pull like the hiring manager to ensure that, you know, are we seeing variances in similar roles based off of the hiring manager, or, you know, are we not aligned on what we should be compensating these employees, to take a look at that. So you want to look at those census data. You want to identify in the outliers in the compensation. So if you're seeing similar positions or same positions have different compensation, what is the reasons behind that? Can we associate that with bona fide business factors that are outlined in the Oregon Equal Pay Act? Things like tenure, responsibilities, education level, location, skills. Are there things that can differentiate that pay from the other individual? So what does that look like? And then also, make adjustments. So if you do see outliers to those positions, making sure that you're making a concerted effort to adjust compensation to keep in line with the comparable position that you've seen a misalignment in compensation with. So it goes a long ways to make sure that you're showing progress to making those adjustments, whether that be like quarterly increases or semi-annual increases to bring them more in line. And then kind of one of the key things is obtaining a legal review. So it's important to have this looked at through a legal lens. Is this information in compliance with a lot of the state laws or federal laws? And what are some recommendations in terms of how transparent we should be with communicating this pay equity analysis?
All right, we got another poll. Let's see where everybody's at. Have you conducted a pay equity analysis since the Oregon Equal Pay Act was formed? Let's see where everybody's at. Got a lot of responses so far. Interesting. Tyler, what have you seen as far as like common challenges companies face when conducting these pay equity analysis, and how could those be addressed?
I mean, it's definitely the work associated with pulling the data and making sure you're running the analysis. It is a lot of work, so it can be daunting in terms to who are we assigning this responsibility to kind of see if there's any kind of differentials or variances in compensation with our employees. Are there things that we should be concerned about? And also having that legal oversight. It's in working with attorneys. Maybe an organization might not have that capability or to do that, so ensuring that there's a legal oversight and that we have some guidance from legal as well. But it can be a kind of a daunting task to undertake on the initial aspects of it. So, looking at a lot of the data, looking at a lot of the factors there. You're not as aware of certain laws around the Oregon Equal Pay Act. Is it a kind of vague law that's in place, but navigating that is very important.
Are you surprised by these results? 39% said yes, they have, 45% no, 16% unsure, maybe just because they're not super involved or maybe new to the organization.
That doesn't surprise me. I think it's around 50-50. Some do, some don't. And I think some organizations are just, maybe they're a little hesitant to even see, what the rule looks like. Maybe they don't want to know, but I think it's important to have the analysis done to make sure you're in compliance, to help mitigate any risks that might come up through inequitable positions.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. We're gonna move on. We're getting a lot of good questions coming in, so I'm gonna save those for Q&A, but keep adding those questions. They're great. We'll address them at the end. Number 5.
Yeah, so it's a big one. So communication. So you've gone through the process of updating your job descriptions, benchmarking the roles. You've conducted a pay equity analysis. What's next? How do we want to communicate this with our organization? How transparent do we want to be with this information that we've obtained, that we've seen? And then who's involved and who's going to be responsible for doing this? So like kind of the first point, identify who will be spearheading the communication and the compensation management process. So is this going to be a leadership team, or is this going to be HR? So whoever's, identifying whoever's going to be responsible for delivering compensation, strategic compensation, the process and updates is vital. And then also, defining the reason and purpose of the compensation changes. So, why are we doing this? Why are we taking a look at the compensation for positions? Is it just in our compensation philosophy saying that we need to update and review compensation on an annual basis? what does our compensation strategy look like? Where do we want to be in the market? Do we want to lead the market, lag the market in terms of compensation, or meet the market? A lot of 85% of organizations strive to meet the market in compensation. So conveying that to staff, letting them know that, we are trying to, meet the market in terms of where compensation is at for your positions. And then also letting, them know how often we review this information. Many years can go by before you have a update to a compensation structure. And by the time you do that, there could be a lot of positions that are not aligned with the current market. So, it's good to have a consistent review process where you're looking at it maybe annually, maybe even more frequently than that. We've, especially the last couple of years, where we've seen kind of a volatile, employee compensation market, where positions have been being adjusted more frequently than they have been in the past. Maybe it's time we look at our compensation at a semi-annual basis or biannual basis. And then, what is as mentioned, what's the company's approach to compensation, transparency, and pay equity? How do we are we going to be running pay equity analysis frequently? Or how are you communicate compensation adjustments? Are we going to let employees see their compensation for their position, or maybe the subsequent position if they're in a position of advancement? Or are we going to have just total transparency, say, hey, here's all the information, here's all the data, we are fully transparent, we have nothing to hide, here's what it looks like. And then the last point kind of circles back to that ongoing feedback loop. Encourage feedback, encourage discussion with your staff. So I know compensation is kind of a tough thing to talk about, especially with management or leadership, but it's crucial. And from a leadership standpoint, you can't stop people from talking about compensation. Employees will talk about it. So getting ahead of that and making sure that you're kind of steering that narrative of your compensation, that's key for your communication strategy.
Right. If there's anything I've learned in my profession as a marketing leader, it's when you think you've communicated something enough, you really haven't.
Right. Yeah.
And if you haven't, and this is why it's important on the compensation philosophy side, is if you haven't defined that and talked about it over and over and over again to the point it's ingrained, people will start making up stories in their head.
Right.
And tell their own narrative. And it's the same with marketing and storytelling and all that. But just if there's anything to take away from this bullet point, is you need to communicate it over and over again frequently.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a plan in place where if an employee is coming to you with questions over compensation, how to respond and approach that feedback. So it's all key to the whole communication of compensation strategy there.
There's a question that came in that I think ties in nicely with what you said about level of transparency. So what recommendation on what level of transparency to have around compensation? Like no communication or transparency, just salary bands, or everybody knows everybody's salary?
Yeah.
Like and it probably depends, right?
It really depends on the kind of the organizational's values and culture. But really we recommend kind of a hybrid approach, really, where it's the employee can see their pay grade or the range of their position and where they are at within that position, because that can steer discussions over, if an employee wants to get higher in the range, well, what does the employee need to do to get to that point? What goals can we set that will make that jump? But also, if an individual is maybe potentially moving up into a role, or are looking to move up into a role, we can maybe kind of convey the next grade up. What does that look like? And again, what goals and what things do we need to see from the employee to get them to that point? It's great.
Okay, let's move on. We still got lots of good questions coming in, so we'll save those. Recommended next steps.
Yeah. So I think one of the ones that's kind of coming more commonplace now is creating a compensation committee. So having representation across multiple departments, not just HR, but having finance, benefits, or other ops, leadership feedback from those departments is very vital to a healthy compensation strategy. So create a committee, get individuals and leadership or managers of those departments and various departments involved in compensation, and what does it look like in terms of how we want to communicate that, not only across departments, but organization as a whole. And then have consistent meetings. So touch base meetings. What's, again, utilizing those pulse surveys, maybe, what's the feedback we're receiving? Are there struggles in your department that we're noticing from a benefits compensation standpoint that we need to address as a whole? And so getting those constant feedback from, your advocate in the compensation committee is key. And then also, seek third-party consultation. So sometimes, you may not have the budget to purchase a survey platform or market analysis, and maybe you don't have the employees in that space to conduct an appropriate compensation analysis or pay equity analysis. So working with a third-party consultant can provide not only kind of an unbiased look at compensation, but also they have the tools, and the kind of knowledge and experience to develop it well. And then also they can conduct, wage surveys and pay equity analysis for you as well.
Let's do our last poll. Do you have a compensation committee in place? And then Tyler, as people are responding to this, what is this compensation committee? What do they talk about? What do they do? What are their roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, some of the key things is communication of compensation. Really, how do we want to communicate compensation across departments? What does this look like from an organizational standpoint? Also, as well as, are we seeing any feedback from our departments or segments of business that we need to address and kind of look at, or triage any situations that are occurring there? And as well as working with the executive team on, do we need to overhaul our compensation process or plan, and what does that look like? So it's kind of the bridge between the employees and the executive team.
If you were to guess before I share the results I'm about to,
I'm gonna say majority don't have a compensation.
Correct. Yeah. Here's the result. Not everybody's taking it. We got 76% participated, but I'm going to share the results here. 91% said no. You're not surprised by this, clearly, but maybe this is it's up and coming thing, and maybe we need to write a blog post about how to do this effectively or something. But
that's actually a great thing. It is kind of becoming more newer, more commonplace now, especially after what we saw with COVID and what remote work, hybrid work did, and then also, as I mentioned, compensation inflation. When all that kind of came into play in the past couple of years, organizations needed a way to help kind of corral that information and then that feedback, and have a good outlet that's kind of a bridge the gap between the employees and the executive team. So that was the kind of the impetus to kind of create these compensation committees.
Excellent. All right. We've got 7 minutes left before the webinar ends. We're going to do some Q&A, but first I just wanted to make sure that people know about upcoming events that we have coming up. There's 3 virtual workshops. We're also working on another webinar for May. Don't have it on the website yet, but that will come soon. That's on Exit Planning 301. But these 3 virtual workshops, the QR code's there. It'll take you to the events page for registration, and clients for 2024 get these absolutely free. Things will change a little bit in 2025, but these are available. All right, Tyler, let's try to be efficient here.
Yeah.
Is it necessary to include pay scale or range for the job within a job description?
Okay, so it's a great question. There are laws in place where the pay range needs to be present in job postings. So not necessarily job descriptions, but job postings. So California, Washington have those kind of pay transparency laws where you need to have a range associated with that. And I'm sure Oregon is going to be following suit very shortly. But to answer your question, the job description, no. Job postings, yes. I would definitely recommend doing that. Even if you're in Oregon only, I would recommend doing that now.
Oh, some of these questions are getting complicated, but I love it. Okay, this is a problem that I think a lot of folks run across. So let's tackle this one. Does market demand at a given time sometimes skew compensation made in an offer and throw off the norm equity, so pay compression? And if so, how to handle it with current employees in the same position?
Yeah, and it's a great question. And yes, the fluctuations that we saw, especially a couple of years ago, I know I have anecdotally speaking with clients about, we had this position, the compensation value increased so much that now we have a misalignment with positions. And it is a struggle for organizations to try to right side that. The key is to make a concerted effort to get the underpaid employee who's in a comparable position to that salary that's comparable or aligned with that role. So whether you're doing a percentage or two increase every quarter or maybe semi-annual, that's at least showing that you are making a commitment to that employee, saying, hey, we saw that the compensation shifted in the market considerably. We are doing our best to get you to a point where we feel like you'll be in line with the positions, comparable positions in the organization. But yes, it definitely can skew the data and then creates pay compression issues.
Okay, we're getting so many good questions, and I love the engagement. Probably not going to get to everything, but let's tackle this one. This is a very important one. Compensation can get extremely emotional. What are your recommendations on how to approach this factually and logically, but still recognizing the human element? I have managers and employees who make emotional decisions when it comes to compensation, and I'm constantly working towards pivoting from this.
Yeah,
What do you think?
I mean, that's a fantastic question. And it is, compensation is a very emotional kind of topic. It can be it's vital to a lot of the employees feel as success with the position. So, but coming at it from a standpoint of, this is the market information, this is where we're at currently with the role in terms of the compensation for that position and the range associated with that position. Taking that personal nature out of it and really reflecting on the true nature of the position and saying, okay, well, performance has indicated this. We are comfortable with the salary being to this point here. Maybe in the future that evolves. And as mentioned, we are consistently looking at compensation on an annual basis and making adjustments to our compensation structure frequently. So those can all change, but making sure that the employee is aware that you are doing as an organization, as the employer, you're doing all the right things in terms of looking at market data, making adjustments to compensation when necessary, communicating that out to employees and being transparent with where they're at. That goes a long way with employees. And then just saying, here's your compensation. We don't feel like you get this percentage bump. But really kind of the reason why, explain the why behind that is key to helping, be having a successful discussion with employees over compensation.
This next question I've personally experienced with my own job and with employees of mine. For small organizations where employees have multiple responsibilities that combine job functions, so hybrid role, how can one effectively do a market analysis and equity analysis?
Yeah, so hybrid positions and hybrid roles are a little bit tricky because a lot of, we're seeing now a lot of positions are wearing multiple hats in their position. So it's really trying to capture with the market data, what are the main responsibilities and the social functions of the position? What are we going to be basing this off of the majority of time? So if they are, hybrid position is not always the best approach for roles. Sometimes it can decrease compensation, especially if you're hybriding with a lower compensated position, even though they have those functions. So taking a look at what the primary functions of the position are, benchmarking it to that role there, and then if they are added function responsibilities, applying a premium to those. is it a 5% premium based off of, additional responsibilities or lead functions of a position? Or is it 10%? Are we adding, maybe some oversight, or we're adding some key responsibilities to the success of the organization? So I think, looking at the closest position that is aligned with central functions, and then applying a premium to those to add any other positions of responsibilities to that. Great question.
Good stuff, Tyler. Well, I'm a man of my word. It's 10:45. We're going to end the webinar. There was like 4 or 5 questions we did not get to, but they are like blog post worthy. So I think we could do some sort of follow up, either directly with people, or just look out for the content. This is an important subject. And
absolutely.
If you want to reach out to Tyler, you mind if I give you away your email address live?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tyler.Mavison@xeniumhr.com. Reach out to him, or you can reach out to me, Brandon .laws@xeniumhr.com. If you want to just reach our general channels, blog, podcast, webinars, all that stuff is free. We'd love for you to follow our content. Tyler Mavison, thank you so much. This is super informative and very engaging. Thank you so much.
Of course. Happy to talk about compensation any day of the week.
All right. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thanks for joining.